You're listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who, where we discuss everything about the hit BBC series, Doctor Who. And today we're discussing the latest episode of the 15th Doctor, called Boom. I'm Dom Bettinelli, and joining me today on the panel are Father Cory Sticha. Hey, Father Cory.
How's it going?
And Jimmy Akin. Hey, Jimmy.
No boom today, boom tomorrow. There's always a boom tomorrow.
You guys didn't have Boomtown as kids. I think that was a Boston kid show. But anyway.
There's also a Doctor Who episode in the first Russell T Davies era.
Yep.
Right. And Kaboom, which was the 13th Doctor story.
And Kablam, which was a very underrated Nickelodeon season.
Actually, it was Kablam, the 13th Doctor. You're right, Father Cory. Yeah.
Yep.
Anyway. Moving on. Folks, be sure to follow The Secrets of Doctor Who, where you can get banter like this in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, TuneIn, your favorite podcast app, or at our YouTube channel, youtube.com/StarQuest Media, where you can watch us as we do The Secrets of Doctor Who, and where you should hit the bell to get notifications after subscribing, of course. Another show on the StarQuest Network I want to tell you about is The Secrets of Stargate, which also we provide as a video show on our YouTube channel. And you should check that out wherever fine podcasts are found, or at sqpn.com/Stargate. So, and also we have a bunch of listener feedback on our discussion of the first two episodes of this season. So be sure to stick around to the end to listen to that. But in the meantime, Jimmy, can you give us a recap of what happens in Boom?
Sure. This one's pretty densely packed for just 40 whatever minutes. In this episode, the 15th Doctor takes Ruby for her first adventure off Earth. We open on a battlefield on the planet of Casterian 3, where 51st century Anglican Marines are fighting the Casterians who they never see. An ambulance made by the Villain Guard Corporation determines that a soldier named John Francis Vader can't be cured of his injury in an acceptable time frame and kills him, compressing his remains into a small tube-like form. The Doctor hears his death cry and comes rushing out of the TARDIS to help. Not realizing the danger he's in, he steps on a landmine and freezes. The landmine is triggered by the impact of his step, and it's now trying to determine if it has impacted a viable target and should explode. The Doctor must basically stay frozen in place while the landmine makes this determination, and he spends almost the entire episode standing on it. This leaves Ruby to try to help solve the problem, and we get a series of escalatingly more dangerous situations and complications. It turns out that Vader's remains have a partial AI data ghost of his personality that can appear in hologram form to interact with those he left behind. And then Vader's daughter shows up, who doesn't know he's dead. Then an ambulance grabs the Doctor, but it can't identify him, and a Marine named Mundy Flynn shows up to retrieve Vader's remains. Flynn reveals that the landmine the Doctor is standing on will eventually fail-safe and explode if it can't determine if he's a viable target. And the way the mine works, the Doctor himself will be the explosive. Only since he's a Time Lord and thus a complex space-time event, he will be powerful enough to blow up half the planet. To distract the ambulance, which detects combat, Mundy tells Ruby to shoot her in the arm on the lowest setting. But then another Marine, Canto, appears and thinks Ruby is about to kill Mundy, so he shoots her dead. Yes, literally dead. Ruby dies on her first off-world adventure. With time running out before the landmine goes fail-safe, Mundy asks the Doctor what they can do, and he says they should surrender. He knows that there aren't really any Casterians, and he's worked out that the whole war is due to an accidental triggering of the Villain Guard combat algorithm. So surrendering will turn off all the munitions and deactivate the landmine. The Doctor tries to send the data ghost of Vader into the Villain Guard systems to get proof of this so that the Bishop can authorize a surrender, but the Vader hologram objects. The Doctor appeals to him, dad, to save his daughter, and he goes. But the Villain Guard systems try to defend themselves and say that they have deleted the data ghost as a hostile virus. But the data ghost comes through and manages to deactivate all the Villain Guard systems on the planet, releasing the Doctor from the landmine and saving everybody. It also causes the ambulance to begin its revivification protocol and restore Ruby to life. At the end, the Doctor gives his condolences to Vader's daughter, Splice, but she says her dad isn't gone, he's just dead. And the Doctor tells her to keep the faith. The end.
All right. Father Cory, your impression of this one?
You know, there's there's a lot of little things in this episode I like, but in general, I really am not. This is not Stephen Moffat's greatest episode by any stretch of the imagination.
He wrote this one. Yep.
Yeah. It's anti-algorithm, anti-military industrial complex, anti-religion, and anti-capitalism all roll into one. So not the biggest fan.
All right, Jimmy, your overall impression?
Yeah, I agree. It's not Blink or Silence in the Library, but I have to sort of split this one in two. On the one hand, if I take it as a story, it's really good. It's really good as a story. We have effective escalation and drama and all kinds of stuff is there to like on the story level. Then there's the messaging level. Here, there's a lot to not like. We have some anti-religion themes, even though they take the edge off of them in the end. You know, Mundy tells the doctor, it sounds like you don't like faith much when he tells Splice to keep the faith. And he says, well, I may not like it, but that doesn't mean I don't need it. So there's an acknowledgement that he has faith of some form himself. So they kind of take the edge off that, but he does have an pretty anti-faith speech that's sort of a juvenile atheist rant about how faith means not thinking for yourself. And that is not at all what faith means. Right. There's also an anti-capitalist message. I don't have a problem with dystopian futures with the Villain Guard Corporation having a combat algorithm designed to keep people in a war and keep people buying munitions. That's just evil capitalism, but that's not the same thing as capitalism itself. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, I don't mind a dystopia where capitalism has gone wrong, but this is not an effective critique of the capitalist system. And then, as we mentioned, there's more leaning into LGBTQ plus whatever stuff this season. And I counted 4 different references to that kind of stuff in here. Mm-hmm. They're all minor things on the dialogue level, but 4 in one episode, that's just ridiculous.
That's intent. That's not just coincidence. So I'm in agreement with both of you. There are things to like, things to dislike. I obviously dislike the anti-faith message that the doctor gave. Also, Stephen Moffat comes back and suddenly he's killing everyone.
Yeah,
or at least 2 characters who stay dead. But he kills the companion again and then pulls it back again. That's like the Stephen Moffat signature at this point.
Mm-hmm. And he does a River song on Vader. You know, mm-hmm. he dies physically, but then there's this data ghost of him that preserves at least the core of his personality.
Right.
Hey,
exactly.
Who turned out the lights? Hey, who turned out the lights?
By the way, notice what Vader's last name means in like Dutch. It means father.
I wanted to point out the names because we have a lot of names that have religious connotations. So Mundy, her name is spelled Mundy, but it's related to like Maundy Thursday, which is a Anglican name for Holy Thursday or Protestant.
That's a traditional name even in the Catholic Church.
Yeah, I should say it's more used by Protestants today than by Catholics. Put it that way.
It comes from the gospel reading for that day, which is Jesus's passage from the Gospel of John. I give you a new commandment to love each other. And in Latin, the word for commandment there is mandatum, which became Maundy.
Very good. Canto is a type of religious singing or song. There's a Canterbury in there as well. So it's kind of interesting. All of these Anglican Marines and these Anglican Marines, we saw them the first time in a previous Moffat story, which was The Wreck of the Byzantium, which was a River song, 10th Doctor, 11th Doctor.
And they appeared much more in A Good Man Goes to War in the 11th Doctor's time.
Right. So Moffat likes these guys, or at least likes to bring them in. We have the Doctor talking again a lot about him being a dad. We got that in The Devil's Cord. We get that again in this one. There's a lot of mention of this. I don't know if that's prefigurement of something Susan coming back, or it's just coincidence, but it's notable just how often it comes up. And speaking of Susan coming back, we talked a lot about how a particular actress keeps showing up in every 15th Doctor story, Susan Twist. And this time she was the ambulance.
Yeah. She's the holographic interface of the ambulance, and for the first time, the doctor gets to see her.
Right.
Right. Yeah, because he's always had his back turned or facing,
or was not present, like in Wild Blue Yonder when she was present.
Right. So kind of interesting to see, that this has got lots of fans speculating on what she's about and whether she's Susan or somehow related to Susan. So I thought that was interesting. Another little interesting tidbit is the actress who plays Mundy, Flynn, is next season's companion. Her name is Verada Setu. And I don't know if that means that she'll be the companion as Mundy or whether it'll be a new role.
So a couple clarifications. Ruby is still going to be a companion next season, apparently, but alongside the new one. So it looks like next season we're going to have a kind of two companion situation. The Ruby may not be in every episode, but apparently they're going to be good. We're going to have two companions, sort of. Mm-hmm. The other thing is Russell T. Davies has clarified that Mundy's story is over, and we're going to have to see how the actress comes in as the new companion.
Interesting. Whether it's maybe, well, I don't know if she'd be a prequel because she doesn't remember the doctor. So
it could just be she's a different character being played by the same person, or it could be something more than that. But Mundy is done.
Okay. It is interesting.
They could do like some early relation or something like that too. They've done it before. Yep.
They did it in the first They did something like that in the first Doctor's time, where they went back in time to. It's in the a series called The Massacre, which is about St. Bartholomew's Day in France, and they meet this young French woman who then turns out to be the next companion, Dodo Chaplet. Who is apparently a descendant of the French woman they met.
Oh, interesting.
Well, and they did it in New Who, where you had the character who went on to Torchwood.
Mm-hmm. Right.
How they same actress played her great grandmother or something like that at the time of Charles Dickens.
And Clara and all that sort of stuff. Yep. One criticism I've seen of the Doctor, especially in this one, is that he's too emotional. Because he spends a portion of this episode crying. I don't know. I feel like
he's apparently cried. I saw one reviewer say he's cried in every episode thus far. Mm-hmm. I noticed it here, and I thought it was very effective. I don't mind the Doctor being emotional. That's fine. Mm-hmm. He's showing human emotion, and that makes him relatable. He doesn't always, different doctors have different personalities. Some are going to be more emotional than others.
Yeah, I'm sorry. If you're standing on a smart mind, you're probably going to be crying too.
You're entitled. At that point, you have every right in the world.
Not to mention the little girl who's just been made an orphan, and Ruby is dead, on the ground next to you.
Oh, let's talk about the little girl, because I think that I've seen some criticism of that character that I think is kind of warranted. This little girl, now I'm terrible at estimating ages, but she looks like she's, 10, 11 years old.
Sure.
And she's mentally like 4 because she doesn't understand her dad being, she's walked out into a war zone to find her dad. And number one, why wasn't she being monitored back at the base? Why was she even allowed on the base? Much less, and if she's there, she should be monitored. He needs a babysitter.
Right.
But she comes out, and, I can suppose maybe she evaded the babysitter, but she comes out and hears, before she sees, she hears her dad's voice, because the AI data ghost is talking to the Doctor. So she knows she had a data link indicating he was here, and then she heard his voice. So she's like, "Where's my daddy?" And the Doctor and Ruby try to hide from her the fact her daddy is dead. Mm-hmm. But then the data ghost gets activated because the Doctor says her full name, and that activates the data ghost with a special message from her dad. And so she's seeing her dad in hologram form, and he starts it starts some kind of interest in memorial service. I've seen things like this in real life where you go to the memorial service and they got a big video screen and they're putting up pictures from the person's life on it.
Yeah, we did this with my mom and my dad. Yeah.
Yeah, this wasn't a thing back when I was a kid, but apparently it is now. And so the Data Ghost is doing kind of the same thing. He's putting up pictures of him and his daughter together, and she's sitting there looking at him. It's like, oh, that's the time we saw the antelope and stuff like that. And she seems emotionally oblivious to the fact her dad is actually dead. Mm-hmm. It's like she doesn't understand what death is or something. And it's age inappropriate for a child who's 10 or 11 years old. In a war. She ought to know. Right. She ought to know what death is by that age.
Yeah. And speaking about the memorial service, that's very common now. Having done a lot of funerals as a priest, it's very common. And then the idea of having a military member having family members with them on a base, that's very common when you are behind the lines. Let's say in here in the United States on a base. Yeah. Oh yeah, there's child. There's
schools.
Yeah, there's schools, there's child development centers, basically preschools. There's all that kind of stuff. That's very common. Not at a deployment. Somebody doesn't deploy to the sandbox and take their kids with them. That just doesn't happen.
I mean, even in a previous era where it took months to travel between, from your homeland to wherever the war was going to be by ship, usually. They didn't generally have families go on these voyages either. It just wasn't a thing.
You left the kids at home and put the dads on a troop ship.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. I thought it was really a weird, we're asked to suspend our disbelief here. It's a bit of a stretch, but what I can see what Moffat's trying to do with this story is he wants to create this, this motivation for this father, or at least the AI ghost of the father to take action to save his daughter, which
it's okay.
Yeah. I mean, there's ways you could have done this where she wasn't present, but I suppose it would remove the immediacy of seeing the child's face on screen.
You could have had a military base where the daughter that's not in the war zone and just left her on the base, but because the doctor's going to blow up half the planet, it's going to kill your daughter if you don't solve this, Vader.
Yeah.
But there's also the that scene where Ruby is literally wrestling her to the ground before she can cause the mind to go off. Stuff like that. It's little things like that they couldn't have done. To amp up the drama.
Was Ruby too cavalier about approaching the doctor when he's like ordering her to stay away? I mean,
I didn't have a problem with that. I mean, I thought about it, but I didn't have a problem with it because different companions are different. And some of the companions, just like doctors, are different, and some companions are going to be more risk takers than others. And so having her stand up to him, and he's like, I forbid this. You cannot come close to me. You must throw this thing to me so I can counterbalance my weight on this landmine. And her just saying, no, it'll work much better if I hand it to you, and I don't care, and I'm coming. So, that could, some people could maybe do that. And I don't mind Ruby being one of those people.
And I could see even and this wasn't in dialogue or anything like that, but I could see, if that was me, I'd be like, yeah, my aim ain't that good when I throw. You want me to just hand it to you. Trust me.
And in the end, it wouldn't have mattered one way or the other because if the doctor exploded, it would have taken out half the planet. And so it doesn't matter how far away Ruby was.
Exactly.
He starts singing the Skyboat song sort of as a way to calm himself down,
which the second doctor used to play on his recorder.
Right. I was going to mention, so it's the second doctor connection. And that's one of the things I was going to mention about the doctor being emotional. It reminds me a lot of, not that the second doctor was emotional and cried a lot, but he was less sure. He was in New Who, and I think a lot of fans who are primarily New Who fans, they think of the 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th Doctor as stolid, Time Lord victorious, always confident, sometimes defeated, but never, like this. I mean, even the 10th Doctor, at his most emotional when Wilf was sacrificing himself for the Doctor, it wasn't like crying like this, but the second Doctor was more emotional, more unsure.
The 13th Doctor is very different in how he comes off than the second Doctor, but they do share commonalities. Neither one of them had the burden.
Right.
That
15th.
I'm sorry, 15th.
Yeah.
Neither the second nor the 15th Doctor had the burden that the other doctors, especially the recent ones, have been carrying. Yeah. The second Doctor was childlike. He was humble. He was emotional. He was ebullient, and the 15th Doctor is a lot of those things. I don't know that I'd say he's childlike, but in all these, they're both definitely unburdened. And what the second Doctor has that the 15th Doctor hadn't shown thus far is the second Doctor was Columbo. Mm-hmm. He was deliberately using humility as a way of keeping people from realizing how on top of things he was. And we haven't really seen the 15th Doctor do that yet.
Yeah, the second Doctor is really good at pretending to be the dimwit, where he's like, "Oh, I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's going on. Oh, I just ruined your plans. Oh, well, sorry."
So we have this corporation, the evil corporation called Villain Guard, which is a bit on the nose.
Great name. Yeah.
And they've kind of commercialized modern warfare to a point where they have a monopoly on it. They supply both sides, and by their algorithms and the way they create an acceptable casualty rate that keeps conflict going at a low level, which is an interesting critique of modern geopolitics, I suppose. I mean, you could, if from a certain point of view, private military corporations and this sort of thing could be criticized for.
Oh, it's not just modern. It's this has been standard in the Middle East for thousands of years.
Right.
You have ongoing low-level conflict between different groups that there's no clear terminus for.
Right. But in this case, it's a third party keeping it going for profit.
Yeah. And of course, you had privateers and things like that going back to the great days of sailing, where their whole job was to get money to cause trouble.
Right. So you have that, and that's why, for instance, the smart mine doesn't explode right away, because we don't want to waste a product. When we want it to be efficient and to make sure it only blows up when someone's actually standing on it, that sort of thing.
And the mine doesn't actually blow up because it has like cloak, and so we see the one guy step on it, he blows up, and the mine cloaks itself again. It's ready to go for the next target.
Right. I have to say, Smart Mine as a name, it's kind of funny because it makes it sound like an Internet of Things, like home automation thing. So I think that's clever on Moffat's part. That's a little bit of clever.
And it looks like a Roomba. It looks
does.
just like a Roomba.
And they talk about how the landmines migrate. So they're not locked into one location, which is a logical progression of landmine technology in the future.
Right.
I liked how Ruby immediately asks, "What is a landmine doing that lights up?" And the Doctor says, Lights work well on a showroom floor.
Yep.
Flashy lights, death by salesman, I think he puts it, which is a nice little phrase. So the ambulances are going haywire, or at least that's what the soldiers think. Although it turns out that this is probably they're acting according to their design, which is
it's a feature, not a bug.
Yeah, right. Your healing is too expensive, and so we have to terminate you. We have to. It's sort of a triage with completely different criteria. Not triage as in who can we heal and who can't be saved. It's who's more cost effective to heal and who will cost too much to heal. And that was the fate of John Francis Vader, because he was blinded before the show began. He appears on,
and it would take 4 weeks to heal his vision, and that's too much. So this is basically economic triage.
Right. So when Ruby gets shot through this misunderstanding between Canto, Mundy, and Ruby, this is the determination that the ambulance makes, is that she'd be too expensive to heal. But it identifies her.
It identifies her. But the reason it won't heal Ruby is she's not ordained. She's not a soldier.
Right. That's right. She's not in the system. But it identifies her. So somehow it knows who she is and says she is 3,082 years old. And then next of kin.
Which tells us this happens in the year 5078, if you do the math.
Yeah.
It also starts snowing as Ruby is dying, but then when
Again.
she actually dies, the snow freezes in the air.
Yeah.
It stops falling.
That is so this snowfall theme keeps coming around, and it's actual snowfall. It's not just this visual hallucination. They're seeing it, they're touching it. These flakes are there somehow, which is interesting. But I like the whole point. Like, it's next of kin, and it stalls on next of kin, like it can't get it out. And Ruby's like, "I'm dying here. Tell me who my next of kin is."
Well, and they've shown that when the ambulances don't have information, they go in that loop where they stutter.
Yeah.
And so it's like, okay, it's trying to find this information and it can't.
I interpreted it as the ambulance asking Ruby who her next of kin is, because it's made the determination it's not going to heal her. And so it's like requesting who is your next of kin. Except
she was like saying, "Tell me who my next of kin is." So I don't know. I took it the other way.
And when Vader died, it listed Splice as the next of kin.
Mm-hmm.
So previously it showed that here's the vital information and here's the next of kin listed.
Right.
And so this time it sat there and stuttered as it tried to figure out who the next kin was.
And then thoughts and prayers, the completely insincere.
Yep.
Yeah. I've never liked this thoughts and prayers nonsense. Back in the day when I was growing up, we just say, "I'll be praying for you."
Yep.
Right.
And what is this thoughts business? I don't care if you have thoughts about me. That's not going to affect things. I want you to pray for me.
Thoughts and prayers sort of equates prayers with good thoughts, which good thoughts, like you said, Jimmy, don't do anything.
Yeah, good vibrations,
Right. Prayers are effective, but thoughts and prayers, I know some people mean it well. They mean the best of it, but thoughts and prayers is sort of we know prayers don't really work, but we're offering it as sort of a social convention condolence.
Right.
Well, for those, I view it as sort of a non-believer, atheist way of trying to have something to say that's like, "I'll be praying for you."
Yep.
Yeah.
But without any expectation it's really going to do anything.
Right. Prayer works, actually, folks. There's someone up there listening.
Yeah.
As you mentioned, Jimmy, the only solution is surrender, which is kind of an interesting. This is the gate. I feel like this is sort of a typical doctor's solution, which is it's the reverse of what you expect it to be. Rather than win, the only way to win is to not to play the game, sort of the war games thing. And we just need to surrender, and because there's no enemy, there'd be no bad consequence, but you just have to convince them to surrender. But I think it was clever that actually wasn't the end solution. That they twisted it on us there, which I think is clever.
The data ghost actually did corrupt the Villain Guard algorithm, and so they didn't have to surrender.
Right.
By the way, Villain Guard was introduced back in I'm blanking on the name of it. It was the first Stephen Moffat story in the 9th Doctor season. The "Are You My Mummy?" Two-parter.
Yes.
That's where Villain Guard got introduced. So Stephen Moffat is bringing back all of these different concepts. He, the Marines and the Villain Guard Corporation, all this stuff that he's previously created, he's pulling it all back together and letting us see the world where it was all happening. See a world where all of these things are interacting in the 51st century.
It was also in the remember Twice Upon a Time where the 12th Doctor met the First Doctor on a battlefield. Mm-hmm. That was they were there involved in that as well. Interesting. Kind of curious that they would bring it back then. Whether it's just we need a evil military corporation and we just need it, or if they're doing something with that.
The Empty Child. That was the name of the first part of the two-parter.
And the Doctor Dances, I think, was the second one.
Yep.
Yeah.
And he brought back fish fingers and custard.
Yeah. I like that. At the end, the Doctor says, "I'm going to be checking in from time to time. My favorite dish is fish fingers and custard." That was nice.
Yeah. Jimmy, you've tried fish fingers and custard?
I have. Yeah, it was okay.
Yeah. So let's talk about the whole faith thing. The Doctor, tells Mundy that, she's responding to this idea that the doctor's going to explode and, we're going to destroy the planet, and we need a solution. And her response is to appeal to her faith, that I have faith that, it will turn out okay. And he kind of berates her, he says, and this is what I wrote down, faith is the magic word that keeps you from never having to think for yourself.
Yeah, the context is a little different. Ruby has died, and the doctor is expositing about what's really going on here. This is
okay.
This is a war caused by the algorithm. Right. And he says, but they don't notice because they have faith, the magic word that keeps you from never having to think for yourself, which is nonsense.
Right.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. That's just, I'm sorry, Stephen Moffat. I don't care what your personal beliefs are, but that is like 8th grade atheist level, rhetoric.
Right. And then the slight pullback at the end, which is I just because I don't like it doesn't mean I don't need it, is your standard agnostic waffling, basically. It's like, stand on something. You know what I mean? Stand for something.
Mr. Spock had a better approach to faith.
Which was that?
Well, that you need to make leaps of it from time to time, and even though it goes beyond logic, it is something that is necessary.
Mm-hmm. And the fact is, one of the definitions of theology is faith seeking understanding. Mm-hmm. It's thinking about these issues of faith. So it definitely needs to think for yourself.
And frankly, everyone has faith anyway. It's just a question of what do you have faith in?
Mm-hmm. Right. And to be fair, Splice has a pretty solid faith, the little girl, in that she just accepts as reality, my daddy's not dead. He's just not here. He's in an afterlife. And the doctor kind of accepts it. And then there's an interesting little discussion at the end about death and dying, where he talks about how dying defines us. We are dead a lot longer than we are alive, which is true.
Yeah. And that's a callback to Silence in the Library.
Yep.
Where the doctor and Donna are, the doctor's talking about all the books in the library, and he'd like to go look at the biography section. And Donna says, oh, yeah, with a nice death at the end of every one. And he's like, that's where he originally said death defines us.
Yep. And then he says something which I think is really nice, which is what really survives of us is love. In other words, how we love in this life really defines our existence for all the time we're going to be dead.
The specific line is, a sad old man once told me, what survives of us is love. And that's a reference to the English poet Philip Larkin.
Nice.
Who I guess, like many poets, may have been a bit tortured. And so that may justify the sad old man bit. Or as the Beatles put it, and in the end, the love you take is equal to the love you make.
Very good. Or, all you need is love. Nah. So,
and we had the Beatles last episode.
Yep.
Yeah. And
the poets being tortured is why I can never do poetry in literature class.
That's right. I'll torture them, but I won't, So
I do like at the end where the doctor, he tells Ruby, because there's this moment where originally when we see the battlefield, there's all this smoke on the battlefield. And then they have these hover drones that come along and clean it up. And this is when the doctor has sent Ruby to get something that he can counterbalance himself with, because he can't keep standing on one foot indefinitely. And the drones suck up all the smoke, and all of a sudden Ruby can see the sky clearly, and it's got a big monster planet with rings and multiple moons, and she's gobsmacked. And then the doctor realizes, oh, I get it. This is your first time on another world. Yeah, isn't it awesome? Wait till you see the sunrise. And so at the end of the episode, we get to watch the sunrise, and the doctor's like, okay, seen it. Let's go, like Chevy Chase in one of the vacation movies, I guess. And I've never seen him, but I know that clip.
Yep.
And or have heard about it. And Ruby is like, wait, that was like 2 minutes. And he's like, yeah, we've got things to go. And frankly, your lifespan sucks.
well, especially given how she was just dead, I think her long-term prospects probably aren't great if those are her instincts. So, any other notes on this one that I didn't cover, Father Cory?
So there was a comment where Ruby couldn't believe that the church is a military, as she put it. And of course, the church, the Catholic Church has always had armed forces of some sort or another. You could kind of say by extension, because the Vatican is guarded by the Swiss Guard, the church has a military even to this day. And yes, they are actual trained armed forces. They aren't just they're looking good. They can defend if necessary. Yes. So the church has always had armed forces of one sort or another.
I wouldn't say always, not in the earliest centuries, but for many centuries it has.
In percentage wise, we're talking 10% of a percent time didn't.
Military religious orders, that sort of thing, like the Knights
Templar, for example.
Yep. Right. Yep.
Yeah. And this is one where I don't mind. I mean, front number one, this is the Anglican Church, so I don't have a dog in this fight.
Right.
Yep.
But also I can accept for sci-fi purposes, just name the craziest thing and for the far future and show it on screen. And okay, the Anglican Church becomes a combat unit. Okay, I can accept that I might not like it if I was an Anglican, but just as a sci-fi fan, it's like, okay, name some crazy thing that you wouldn't expect to happen, because there will be crazy things that you wouldn't expect to happen in the far future.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just the absurdity. I mean, it's just, it's laughable. It's funny.
Now, it's meant to be.
Now, come on, this is the real reason why I'm becoming a chaplain in the Air Force. No, it isn't. For those who don't know, by Geneva Convention, chaplains cannot even so much touch a firearm.
Right.
They're non-combatants until if they pick up a firearm in combat, they become combatants.
Yeah.
Yep. Fair game. Jimmy, any other comments?
Nope.
All right. So that is Boom. And our next one is going to be called 73 Yards. But before we go, I did mention we have some feedback. We had lots of great feedback on our last discussion of Space Babies and The Devil's Chord. And the first one came from a longtime listener, Jason, who wrote on our YouTube, while the Beatles don't play as big a role in The Devil's Chord, the plot does resemble the Yellow Submarine animated movie, which is a good catch. Yeah.
I was kind of disappointed they didn't mention in that episode the fact that the episode, the first Doctor serial, The Chase, had a scene where the Doctor was watching a BBC archive of the Beatles that had to be cut because the Beatles wouldn't give reproduction right.
We mentioned that in our discussion about how that happened. Yeah, it's too bad.
And even that was a step down from what they planned. They wanted, since this is a time viewer, they wanted to have interviews with the Beatles as old men, reminiscent on their career, played by the actual Beatles.
Yeah, would have been so good. And yes, the Yellow Submarine had blue meanies who were, attacking music and that sort of thing. So I'm curious whether that was conscious on the part of the writers. Our next comment comes from Caleb on Spotify. That's right. You can actually comment on the show on Spotify. You can watch the video and listen to the audio there. And Caleb says, haven't finished your podcast yet, but my theory is that Mrs. Flood and Susan Twist are the Loom of Fate sisters. With the whole Mavity thing, I'm also wondering if Susan Twist is the meddling monk. To be clear, Susan Twist is the name of the actress.
Right.
So, and she's been
doesn't have a consistent name.
Right. She's been Mrs. Flood in Ambulance and other things.
I have to admit, I'm very skeptical of any of these theories that I've seen online of, this is this character returning or that character returning. I mean, Russell T Davies, he could pull a twist, pun intended, but he's made it clear that this season at least is there's not a lot of returning, if any,
Yeah, I also don't see why they would bring back the meddling monk at this point, because he's too similar to the master. And it would also be, we're going to have to reintroduce this guy now. The theory that I think is most plausible is that Susan is going to return, because Russell T Davies has even dropped hints about that. Right. And so if Susan returns, that would make sense. It just needs to be Carol Ann Ford. I don't care if she's got another face for occasional use, but I want to see Carol Ann Ford as
Yeah.
Susan again.
That's right. I think the only clear thing we can deduce is that this actress is showing up for whatever reason because of some connection to Ruby's origins. I think that's got to be the reason it involved here. C. Bizand on YouTube says, I think Ruby might be related to Susan. Victor on YouTube writes, I bet Susan Twist is a regenerated meddling monk or regenerated Susan Foreman. Then adds later, maybe the oldest one, we get mention of the oldest one, is the trickster.
Waits.
The one who waits.
Yeah.
The trickster. What is the trickster?
The trickster was a recurring villain in the Sarah Jane Adventures.
Okay. That would be an interesting side connection. Then
I think the one who waits is going to be someone new.
Right.
Because the toy maker said that he saw the trickster, he saw the one who waits and ran, and the trickster is not that threatening. The toy maker also said, when the doctor asked who, he said part of someone else's story, suggesting the doctor has not had contact with the one who waits before.
Yeah, interesting. I wonder if any really connections, like maybe Black Guardian or other super powerful beings we've encountered.
It might be another part of that. Well, they've got the Pantheon, which is what the toy maker and the maestro are part of. So
right. Anyway, the last comment comes from Flying Car 100 on YouTube, who says, so what's the whole deal with the Brontosaurus and Apatosaurus thing? I know this is not Secrets of Dinosaurs, but Jimmy, since you brought it up.
Yeah, so there was a period in the sort of the mid 20th century, late 20th century, where paleontologists had a lack of faith in Brontosaurus, and they thought maybe these Brontosaurus skeletons we've got are really just members of another species. They're not an independent species. And so you'd have, people saying like Brontosaurus doesn't exist. They're really all Apatosaurus. But pendulum swung back the other way in recent years. And with more paleontologists supporting the idea that, Brontosaurus is a separate species. It's not the same thing as an Apatosaurus.
I saw an article headline that said T-Rex might be 3 different dinosaurs, and someone responded, you mean like 3 velociraptors standing inside a trench coat? I'm not sure that's what they meant. All right. Thank you, everyone, for your feedback. We do appreciate it. We are looking forward to your feedback on this discussion of Boom. Before we go, we want to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create the Secrets of Doctor Who, including Jonathan R., Father Andrew K., Raymond L., Debbie A., and Justice M. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue the Secrets of Doctor Who and all the shows at StarQuest. And you can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. So that's it for us this time. What did you think of Boom? You can let us know by commenting on the show at sqpn.com, the Secrets of Doctor Who Facebook page. Send an email to drwho@sqpn.com. Visit the StarQuest Discord community at sqpn.com/discord, or watch the Secrets of Doctor Who on our YouTube channel and leave a comment there. It's at youtube.com/StarQuestMedia. Be sure to follow, subscribe, get the notifications by hitting the bell and all that sort of jazz. We'll be back next time, and we'll be discussing 73 Yards. Until then, Jimmy Akin, thank you for joining me and sharing the Secrets of Doctor Who.
Thanks, Tom.
Father Cory Sticha, thank you as well.
thank you, Dom.
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to the Secrets of Doctor Who on StarQuest. And remember, everywhere is a beach eventually.